Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. Thank God for the Royals edition. I am John Bodas of TwinsDaily.com. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
It is funny to we've both been doing this for 20, not this podcast, but covering the Twins, writing about or covering the Twins for 21 years? 22 years.
22, yeah.
22
right,
years.
You're right, 22. Yeah.
This is our 22nd season
Yes.
of doing that. Which, boy, y'all listening to some old-ass dudes. But except for like 3 seasons, it's been thank God for the Royals, I would say. Except for when they went to back-to-back World Series, which is crazy to think about.
Right.
They were, I'm going to say this, I apologize. They were garbage for like the 10 years before that, and they've been garbage for like the 8 years since then, or more than that since then. Right. And it's a weird.
9-1 against them this year. We swept the first series.
I should
right?
look up the Twins' overall record since Kelly left, which was 01, which is then the next year both of us started blogging. Yeah. I wonder, like maybe during the Twins' really bad years, like the 11 to 16 or whatever. I'm going to guess they didn't dominate the Royals, but there are a lot of years, especially until this year, they've been playing them 19 times? No.
Up till this year, they've been playing 18 times, right? 19 times?
19.
19,
Now it's only 13, but there were definitely some years where you'd look back at the end, especially like during some of the Gardy era years too, where you'd look back and they'd beat the White Sox or something in the division by like, I don't know, 4 games, and you'd look and like the White Sox were 500 against the Royals and the Twins went somehow like 25-1 against the Royals. It seemed like some. Yes, thank God for the Royals. I also, speaking of doing this for a long time, I'm gonna say a sentence here because I haven't been able to say this for 20 years, 19 years, 20 years. The Twins have the best ERA in baseball right now. Like as I sit here today. Wow. Now tonight they play and that can change, obviously. But the last time
Orioles have some power.
Yeah, the Orioles are not the Royals, but it's a little tricky because until 2 years ago, the National League had had no DH, and so generally had lower ERAs. Right. And so the odds of an American League team leading the majors in ERA at any point from like 1970 whatever until 3 years ago was pretty low. But the last time the Twins led the American League in ERA for a full season was 2004, which was Johan Santana's breakout first Cy Young season. You still had Radke and Nathan, obviously, Carlos Silva, Kyle Loesch, I think. It's just off the top of my head. I might be wrong about one of those. But so that's 20 seasons ago. And I mean, I don't know that I would say they have the best pitching staff in baseball because that's more subjective. But to sit here as of 9:51 a.m. on, what is this, July 7th, they're like 90 games into the season, essentially. We're 3 games from the All-Star break. They not only lead all of the majors in ERA, they lead them in strikeout rate, batting average against, on-base percentage against, slugging percentage against, obviously OPS against. Right. Yep. They lead them in all the majors in quality starts. They lead all the majors in innings per start. And I'm leaving out, FIP and expected ERA and the nerdier stuff.
Right.
This
is great.
Yeah. I'm just
so
shocked.
Like 12 games above 500 then? 15, 20?
Yeah, that really, they're way out. They're on pace for a whole 85 wins or whatever it is. Obviously that it's, but I worry, and we talked about this like early in the season when this was first becoming a storyline, is I worry that the Twins pitching staff is not going to get enough credit or won't be perceived as quite as great as they've been, because there have just been so many games where some starter goes 6 and gives up 2 or 3 runs, and because the lineup has scored 0 runs or 1 run or 2 runs, the start is not even being appreciated as a good, solid, B+ effort. It's instead, you look at some of the win-loss records even. Pablo López, I think, is 5-5. Sonny Gray's only got 4 wins all year. You look at Bailey Ober, I think it's like 4-3 or whatever, and you look at that, which people still do look at wins and losses for pitchers. And I just think,
well, it's still a 500 team.
Yes, it's like a barely above 500 team.
The pitchers are going to have about a 500 record.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's when you have the best ERA in baseball and your, kind of run distribution offensively is like 27th probably if you were to kind of break it down from a WPA standpoint. Yeah, what does that equal? Well, it equals like 2 games above 500 basically. Right. It's a very strange way to get to 2 games above 500 to be the best at something and almost the worst at the other half of baseball. But I guess you can view it one of 2 ways, which is the hopeful way, the glass half full way is, well, they got a great pitching staff. They got that in place. If the lineup can get their stuff together at all, or if they can add a piece or 2 to the lineup, 3 weeks from now at the trade deadline or whatever, or if Polanco comes back healthy and Buxton and Correa start hitting and on and on, you go, well, that's a pretty easy path then to a legitimately good team because you have the number 1 ERA, have the number 1 pitching staff in baseball. The half-empty version, of course, is, well, you can't count on the number 1 ERA in baseball for the whole season. Like, what happens if the pitching is just good, not unbelievably good, for the remaining 3 months roughly of the season, and the lineup just kind of stays the way they are? Then you might be in some trouble. So I don't know which one of those versions I believe in. I don't think the pitching has been, I'm going to be careful how I phrase this so as to not end up on the preposterous statement, Turney, but I don't think the pitching has been a fluke to the extent that I don't look at, especially the rotation, and think, yeah, they got the number 1 ERA, and yeah, they've thrown the most innings per start, but come on, let's get serious. They've pretty consistently been legit.
I mean, listen, of the 5 guys in the rotation right now,
you
certainly have 4 of them have earned faith long before,
over multiple seasons.
Yeah, over multiple seasons at this point, right? Maeda is still maybe out there a little bit. I will probably talk a little bit about him and his remarkable bounce back here. And I was going to say, if you're wondering whether or not this pitching can continue, well, I mean, I think there's going to be some regression to the mean, as there's always some regression to the mean. And you could argue, well, they don't have the depth that they had at the beginning of the season. Like, it wouldn't necessarily be that so-and-so slides. It could be that, somebody's out with tendonitis for 3 or 4 weeks.
And instead of being able to call up Bailey Ober to replace Maui or Maeda, now Bailey Ober's already in the rotation. So if someone else goes down, you're calling up Louis Varland again, who struggled at the end, or Dallas Keuchel, who's trying to make a comeback, or Brent Hedrick.
But I mean, that is still not terrible depth. Like,
it's just that they've used their premium depth. They've used their uncommon, unique depth, their rare depth, and now they're just normal. A normal, pretty good team that has a couple of starters. They're not super afraid to use.
If you'd have told me 2 months ago that, but you still got the depth of Louis Varland down there, I've been like, yeah, great. Now the fact that he hit a rough spot,
slid a little bit.
He slid, but that was a few starts up here, a few starts down there. Maybe he's just working through some stuff. So I don't know. I still feel pretty good. I still feel pretty good about the depth too. But I also don't feel particularly good about the lineup necessarily.
Right.
Bumping out,
but that's always going to be the case. When you try to pause midstream, like we are right now, there's no reason to think that the pitching staff is going to be worse or that the lineup is better when you're in the moment of it. Do you know what I mean?
Right, that's true.
But as you said, the odds of, let's put it this way, their current ERA as a team is I think 3.55 or something like that. Certainly if you were just a betting robot, you would bet on that being higher than 355 from this point forward, or at the end of the season, let's say, and whatever their OPS is, I don't know, 700, whatever it is. You would bet on the opposite. You would bet on that also being better. But it's just hard to pause midstream and be like, the pitching's going to be worse, the hitting's going to be better.
I will.
Say, where's that been for 3 months?
I will say this though, like in June with the lineup, or May when they were struggling, I was more of a. Yeah, but they've got this, and these. They've still got some cards left to play here. I'm not sure they have as many cards left to play
Well,
as I thought.
the
that
cards
they had.
themselves aren't looking as good necessarily.
Some of those cards have been dealt,
Yeah, I mean,
and then we did not receive
the idea of just wait until this guy gets healthy.
Was not kind.
Yeah, look at you with the John. That's the first time John made the stretch poker analogy. I had 10,000 of them myself, and John finally made one. Now we'll change the scoreboard for that. Poker analogies. Gleeman 10,000, bonus 1. Sometimes you're sitting there and you got pocket kings,
right.
and then you look away and you look back at your cards, and all of a sudden it's 10-5, and you go, that wasn't the cards I thought I had. How's that work? I mean, the idea of, well, just wait until Jorge Polanco gets back. Yeah, that might not be for a month. And also, what are we counting on from him at this point?
Right.
Or, there's other, Buxton, Correa, just wait until, that's like, just wait until my brother shows up. And it's like, then he shows up and it's like, this guy doesn't look that tough anymore all of a sudden.
Which brings us to sort of the other big topic that's happened. Now, this happened a little over a week ago, which was the Twins are tired of waiting. They are they had these team-only meetings, and they're taking over the hitting meetings, and they are...
Which we talked, we're going to talk some about that now. Because it's been 2 weeks since we did a free show, because John abandoned you guys in your time of need. But we also, I should note, did about a half hour or more probably.
Oh, probably 45
breaking
minutes.
down the players-only meeting, the closed-door clubhouse, the hitters meeting being taken over by the hitters, and all the behind-the-scenes stuff with Dan Hayes.
Yeah, with special guest Dan Hayes.
Who was there in Atlanta for that whole thing. And obviously, I would call the most plugged-in Twins media member in the world. Let's call him that.
Okay.
Among other names, I do call him privately. Yeah. And Disco Danny. Hey you, schmuck. But yes, the most plugged in Twins reporter in the world. And I thought he had a lot of good, I would even call them juicy tidbits from some of the behind the scenes stuff. So if you want like a full breakdown of that.
He was there for that, and then he was there for the 3 days after that in Baltimore, where, he was trying to find out what exactly happened.
And also,
meeting. Yeah.
He is the person for whom the most members of the Twins organization are likely to talk to. Just in general, on and off the record. Here's a question I have after that. We just talked about, I said something about brother coming to fight for you.
Yeah.
Which you or Jeff, who was my brother's got my back, or neither? You know what I mean? Like, what's the age difference?
I think 3 years.
Okay.
So I think I would have had to have his back for most of the time. I was the older one.
That's rough for him. I've seen some pictures of you in high school, John. You didn't have anyone's back.
Have Jeff's back.
You barely had a back.
You
looked like just a beanpole.
You are correct. But Jeff didn't look that much different.
So that's what I'm wondering. Yeah. I had no brother, so I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, Jeff would not have. Jeff never had any issues like that.
Because once in a while, I remember, like in junior high,
loved Jeff.
you'd have some beef with some kid, and he would say like, "Oh, my brother's going to show up later," and you'd think, that could go either way. I could be about to get my butt whooped, or maybe I got two of these guys I got to pick on. So I picture you and Jeff. I need to find a double locker.
I was definitely the prototypical older brother.
Okay. Back to the Twins. This is the beauty of having your own podcast.
That's exactly
Something
right.
just strikes me as interesting. So we talked. I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to kind of set this up without rehashing everything that we went into with Dan, because I do think, if you're into this as a topic, you will definitely enjoy the Patreon podcast we did on Wednesday, 2 days ago with Dan. Yeah. Patreon, P-A-T-R-E-O, and patreon.com/Gleeman. A couple of things I think from that I thought were interesting that we kind of talked about and unpacked a little bit with him was, I think probably anybody who's interested read about or heard the quotes from Baldelli and some of the details. They got swept in Atlanta. They closed the clubhouse to the media. They did a players-only meeting in the closed clubhouse. Baldelli talked to the media in a side room and went off, more than he really ever has, other than when he was mad at that umpire in the Toronto game where they kicked him out. He went off there, too. That was a good one. He dropped the F-bomb and walked out of the room. That was pretty good. But he talked at length, and he said a lot of the things that I would say Twins Twitter or this podcast or just the random person sitting in section 320 or whatever at the ballpark have been saying, which is this can't continue. This can't. We're past the point of, similar to what we just said a minute ago, past the point of saying, well, yeah, just wait until this guy comes back, wait until this guy gets back on track. And he specifically has started, I would say, going back a few weeks, but it really came to a head here, talking about the approach and the execution and the game planning and just sort of their ability to adjust mid-game even.
And he seemed to be talking both sort of to people above him and to people below him in the hierarchy,
Yes.
both to his own bosses, but also to I would even say he's just trying to say he's talking to the whole organization. Like as a whole, we have to make some changes.
There were parts of it that you could pull out and say, when he's saying changes need to happen, kind of. He didn't say this, but I thought some of it came across as my hands are tied regarding some of this stuff because I don't make the roster. Right. I get handed 13 hitters every day, and I pick 9 of them to be in the lineup, and I get to put the order that they're in. That's what he gets to do. Yeah. And I think a lot of it was, I don't get to pick who 11, 12, and 13 on this roster are.
And also, I also don't get to control which of those 13 actually pays attention and does what they're supposed to do on that. Right.
With the roster and those sort of changes, which are the kind of actionable things that a fan or a podcaster can be like, why don't they drop this guy and call up this guy, whatever it is. We've done a million of those this year. I thought part of his, I don't want to say rant, but just lengthy answers after the Atlanta sweep were kind of addressed to the front office in that regard. I think to your point, part of it seemed very easy to say this is to the hitting coaches and the advanced scouts and the behind-the-scenes guys, the guys who come up with the game plan, the guys who prior to a week ago lead the hitting meetings with the players, the guys who are trying to get the information and get it to the players. And I think there was frustration there either with the information itself, although he's been pretty careful to always say that the information itself is quality, that the game plan has merit, that it's logical. But clearly there's a disconnect or there's an over-reliance on some aspects of it. So I thought he was
somehow that information is not being implanted in the players, whether that is how it is being presented or whether or not the players are really soaking it in or whether or not they are taking responsibility for the information that they're presented and distilling it themselves or whatever. Right.
And this was a common thing at the end of the Molitor managing era on the pitching side, which guys like Ryan Presley and all that were like, it was early in this regime's front office tenure, and they had ideas about pitching, but they felt like the information that they were providing to the coaching staff and Molitor were being stopped there. Like there was no middleman to convey that information to the pitchers themselves. Yeah. You had Eddie Guardado as the bullpen coach and Molitor, an old school manager, and that sort of thing. So now we've kind of come full circle with that. And then lastly is a lot of it, and probably most of it maybe, you could just easily take as him talking indirectly to the players and essentially saying, you guys got to start to hit. Like there has to be some level, and that's something we've talked about quite a bit, which is I think and there's plenty of blame to go around, but I do think, and I've said this a million times on the show, that it's almost becomes to me a cop-out or providing cover for the organizationally or a bigger picture to just say, fire Rocco, fire Popkins, whatever. And I'm not saying there isn't something to be debated about moves like that. But what I'm saying is I don't think that's going to fix the 13 guys who are responsible for putting up runs on this team. You know what I mean? Like, now, could it help? Sure. And that's why it's worth discussing.
Well, the interesting thing about that is if you've got 2 or 3 players that are really underperforming, well, then it's each of those players' fault that they're underperforming. Right. But you got 13 players that are underperforming. Nobody looks at the 13 players. There's got to be something going on.
You can't fire 13 guys. You can't fire the whole team.
There's no other way to make that change, right? You can't fire 13 guys. But B, also, you just kind of go like, and there's
something systematically or systemically wrong.
You presume that there's something wrong systematically about that, and maybe that's true. There is also, to some extent, if you're one of those 13 underperforming players, there's a comfort there. There's a comfort in, but I'm not hitting, but it's, listen, if I'm one of the 2 guys who's underperforming, all eyes are on me.
But if there's 12 of us.
If there's 12 of us underperforming, we're probably okay. Right. I'm still doing okay compared to the other 11 schmoes.
They'll shoot him first. I get a chance to run.
There is something about that. And to some extent, I got the impression that the rant was sort of like, we got to shake ourselves out of this.
Everyone needs to individually look in the mirror.
And when you have a player's own melee, and the players
they seem to recognize that too.
come up with, we're going to start leading the hitting meetings, and that I think we talked, I don't know if this was on the Patreon or the free podcast a couple of weeks ago, but we talked a little bit about how, when you have, the team leaders are struggling just as much as the rookies and maybe even more than the rookies. It's hard for them to stand up and say, hey, we all got to do this. And they look at you and go, yeah, you first.
Right. It's hard for Correa when he's having his worst season. It's hard for even a leader type of personality like Kyle Farmer, let's say, who's got a 640 OPS or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, that's fine. But, that's.
But on the other hand, if you're that's one way that makes it difficult. The way you can overcome that is, hopefully the way they're kind of doing it, which is like, we're all in this together. We all stink.
Right.
Let's figure out a way that we don't all stink.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's get
this. Is what I say to my cats in the morning when I decide not to take a shower. I say, look, she's going to wake up in a minute. We're all in this together. We all stink. Let's try to get away. Since the closed door meeting, and since then 2 days later in Baltimore, the hitters took over the hitters meeting.
Okay.
And I had it. Tried to kind of go through the information and the data and the game plans on their own, kind of peer-to-peer instead of more of like a lecture hall situation. Yeah. Here's their run totals. They've played 6 games.
Yes.
8.
Yeah. 1.
1. 8. 9. 5. And even one of them against KC. They took a little breakthrough at the
8, 9, and 5 were KC.
Yeah. And also took some late inning stuff there. But on one hand, they're 5-1 since this whole thing. Yeah, and that is the effect that you want anytime you have a closed door meeting and you shake things up and your manager goes on TV and rants about it.
Right.
On the other hand, they're 5-1 mostly because the pitching staff has like an 0.85 ERA during that time.
That's true.
And so it's funny to be like, if you would have told me, the night of the third Atlanta loss when all this kind of came to a head and the frustration really boiled over, hey, in the 6 games after this, they're going to go 5-1. I'd think, oh man, the bats must have just broke through, and God, that must have just been a weight off everyone's shoulder. And it's like, nope, actually, the really, really good pitching staff is going to like be even really, better. Really, even gooder.
Yeah,
so
absolutely right.
And yeah, their pregame and postgame meetings are the same. It is also funny to have a closed door meeting, a players only meeting, and people are standing up and blah blah blah. You got to have some of those pitchers just sitting there at their locker going, well, what do you want me to do? I got 270 ERA. I've been great. I'm going to make the All-Star team. I'm going to, whatever. Before we get into a few other things, and then we're also going to talk about, one of their best hitters, Royce Lewis, is now out for 6 weeks plus probably right now with Jose Miranda coming back. And then we got a few other, got to talk about Pablo Lopez's shutout here and some other stuff. But before we do that, let's talk about our first sponsors here. Longtime sponsor, which is Soda Stick. We always talk about how they're doing kind of small batch creative shirt designs.
Yeah, right. They've all kinds of new stuff going on out there.
When something happens with the Twins or another Minnesota sports team, they jump on it quick.
Right.
They do a good quality shirt with a good looking design, often a very clever, creative design. And when it sells out because they're not producing millions of these.
I'll give you an example. The new a couple weeks ago, I think we talked about the Buck Yeah Trucker Company T-shirt, right? The Buxton type T-shirt. Yeah. That one sold out immediately almost. I think there might be a couple left on there, and maybe some odd sizes, so you can go look at that.
They have a new Town Ball Tour collaboration T-shirt that you can get. They have also just there's also hats and other stuff besides shirts. They've got but the shirts are the draw for me always.
Yeah, they've got a new one coming out, Minnesota pinstripe thing, that design that's coming out pretty soon. I don't think that's available yet, but you might be able to sign up for it on this.
Anyway,
I don't know.
Good guys, right. Minnesota made, good shirts, good designs, creative stuff, small batches.
You'll absolutely find something for anybody in your life that is a sports fan.
Perfect gift-giving opportunity.
Yep.
It's Soda Stick, like Minnesota, sodastickco.com, or just Google Soda Stick. And then when you go to checkout, you put the promo code Gleeman in, and you'll get 15% off your entire order.
I think I might be buying a pair of Raycon headphones. Raycon earbuds here.
Yeah. I have a code you can use. Well, I'll reveal that shortly.
Because the ones I had are Chrissy's now, Yeah. But now I've got, here's the thing, I edit these podcasts on the PC, and I've got like a a wire that runs down to the server that I've got, and I wear these crummy little headphones on there or something. And I keep like kicking the wire and such. Like I should not be wearing wired headphones. Nobody should ever be wearing wired
You're like
headphones
that
anymore.
infomercial where the guy has all this car cleaning equipment and he just like falls
That's
over
right.
and he drops all of it.
This is the black and white scenes in the infomercial. It's me
You know
around
what
my
I'm you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly right.
So, but Raycon
Yes.
makes it easy. Wireless earbuds. And the beauty of Raycon is the product quality is every bit as good and often better than maybe some more expensive products.
Super well engineered stuff.
Yes, we both used it. Our significant others have both stolen our Raycons to use, which is the sign of a true good product.
Exactly
when
right.
a wife steals it, certainly.
Yeah.
And if you want some Raycon earbuds to use, they long-lasting charge.
Right.
Very easy for even doofuses like me to hook them up to
start
Bluetooth.
at like half the price of the regular stuff.
And you can our listeners can get 15% off their Raycon order if you go to buy Raycon, buy like B-U-Y, buy Raycon, R-A-Y-C-O-N, buyraycon.com/Gleeman. That's buyraycon.com/Gleeman to save 15% on Raycons, buyraycon.com/Gleeman. All right. I don't know. On the hitting side, the hitting meeting thing, let me just make sure I didn't have a note or two that I definitely wanted to get to. I mean, I think we got the gist of it. Obviously, if people want kind of the nuts and bolts behind it, and we debated some of the kind of what will be the effect or what even are they...
Or even the focus. Yeah, right.
Because my point that I think is worth making is there's two ways to kind of look at the idea of hitting approach. One is like kind of what happens as you're swinging, which is, they shouldn't always just be looking for all or nothing home runs. They shouldn't be trying to pull everything in the air. That leads to strikeouts. That leads to pop-ups. That leads to just, long stretches of nothing. Why don't they try to spray the ball around to the whole field and shoot the ball to right field, which we've seen a little bit more of? And I think that's all valid. But I honestly think, and this is just an opinion, that the true crux of this issue is what happens before the swing is taking place. It's the game plan itself. It's going up to the plate and what you're expecting to see from the pitcher based on their tendencies and based on the season that they've had and based how they've pitched you in the past and all that, and choosing which pitches to attack, which types of pitches, which counts to attack, how aggressive to be first pitch, second pitch, how aggressive to be with two strikes. Do you try to shorten up with two strikes?
Right.
And so I think those are two things that often just get kind of blended together in the big bucket of hitting approach, let's say. But I do think those are two very different things, and they require kind of different paths to change, which is, when they're talking about the hitters meeting being taken over by the hitters, I know I very much suspect they're not, sitting there going, all right, what should we do today? Well, let's try to shoot the ball to right field. They're saying, here's the scouting reports we got on the pitcher we're about to face, on the relievers we're likely to face. How do we want to kind of the plan of attack versus literally when I'm swinging, what am I trying to accomplish with my swing? And I think those aren't completely separate. Obviously, one leads into the other, and one without the other doesn't really accomplish anything. If one's horrible, you're not going to have good results with the other. But I do think just shoot the ball to right field if you're a right-handed hitter, or if you're Kepler, use the out. Right. That's much more simplistic, or like, I don't know, game to game, at bat to at bat. Whereas really the big picture issue here is more about when you're stepping to the plate, what is in your mind that you're trying to actually accomplish? What is your approach to this at bat, not so much to your swing, I guess is how I would differentiate that. I mean, they're working on both, obviously. I don't mean to imply that like one is not hand in hand with the other, but I just think, you watch a game, they score 8 runs against the Royals, and you go, oh, Correa shot a couple balls to right center, and Vasquez blooped the ball over the second baseman, and you go, well, it's all fixed. And it's like, no, because that's the result, not so much the process to get to that result. And I think the process is probably much trickier to change mid-season because, it's, I don't know, it's kind of what the goal is for an at bat.
Right.
It's like we're trying to get into hitters' counts. We're trying to then pounce on mistakes that are being made by pitchers. We're trying to game plan such that we're scouting them and we know specifically when they do get behind in the count, what do they turn to and where do they throw it so that we can really take advantage of that. And sometimes that works and you score 27 runs in back-to-back games against the Cubs or whatever, but sometimes it doesn't work and you're just like, well, why can't they bloop a few balls to right field and get the runners moving a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested in kind of trying to pay that much closer of an attention to their at-bats to see if that feels like it. To me, all of this is, is from the outside looking into an incredible amount, right? So
sure.
What it is or what is really happening is hard for me to say. To some extent, I think there is, I would say the two things that encouraged me about it is it felt like they had fallen into a very passive approach, and this feels like a little bit more aggressive of an approach. And it also felt to me like they weren't taking ownership of the at-bats as much, right? That they're getting up there like, the pitcher's not doing what we thought he was going to do.
Right.
I don't know what we do now. Well, now they're leading the hitter meeting. I hope that takes enough ownership such that maybe there's a little more talk going on in the dugout or that there's some adjustments being made that this is not, we aren't sitting back and waiting for the hitting coach to fix us, right? We got to go in there and fix this ourselves.
I mean, how many
right?
at bats in a given game or series or a week or whatever are you willing to come back to the dugout after making an out and say, they didn't really do what we thought they were going to do in that? Yeah, like, how many consecutive times are you willing to do that before you either say...
You start making some adjustments. Right. That's
basically.
Right. And, I mean, I will say of the... you went through the run total, which was nice.
Yeah. But it's a very 2023 Twins-esque distribution of runs, which is
very
8s and 9s
right.
and 1s.
Yes, and versus 8s and 9s versus some bad pitchers and some 1s versus...
Sure.
I mean, also, the one of those 1s was versus a lefty. And then the very next game where they did get 8 runs, they got all of those runs late in the game. They didn't get any versus the lefty.
Yeah.
And so, that in particular to me is a frustrating aspect of that feels, again, like they're not making adjustments or not owning the problem. Is when they actually get to the point where they're starting to knock lefties around when you've got a lineup full of right-handed hitters, I'm going to feel a lot better about it. Because the lefties are facing, Royals guy's pretty good, but the Orioles guys, very mediocre lefty that gave it 1 run on
I really hope
Sunday.
Cole Irvin is not listening to this. I'm sorry, Cole. He's a good quality guy. He's close with my family for years.
Yeah,
no, just joking. I agree.
No shame in being a mediocre Major League Baseball pitcher. That's good.
we are under the assumption there's no shame in being a mediocre baseball podcaster, and that's debatable,
exactly
probably.
Right.
So, speaking of pitching, I don't know.
Yeah.
Pablo López, let's talk a little bit about him. It took 1,909 days, over 5 years, for a Twins pitcher to throw a shutout, a 9-inning shutout.
A 9-inning shutout.
Jose Barrios in April of 2018 did it, and then it didn't happen for almost 2,000 days until Joe Ryan did it. And then 13 days later, Pablo López did it.
Funny.
And if, we can talk, obviously saying the Twins have the best ERA in the major leagues is the most definitive way to say things are different with the pitching staff. Right. But that stat is pretty different too, which is you go 5 years without doing something and you do it twice in the span of 2 weeks. Right. And I asked Pablo López post-game, I said, man, this puts a little pressure on Sonny, Bailey, Kenta, right?
Yeah,
and he thought, well,
good.
They got every chance to do it. Let's keep it rolling. And he did mention, which we've heard from a lot of the starting pitchers, even last year, the kind of friendly competition aspect of this rotation, where they do view it as more of like an NFL-style quarterback room or linebackers room or something. They view it as like a unit more so than just 5 starters.
That's definitely something that Sonny Gray leans into.
A veteran thing, and I think Pablo López coming over leaned into that also this year. And, they've talked jokingly about it. I mean, Joe Ryan, when he went 9 innings, one of his answers afterward was, man, Sonny's going to be so worked up about this that I'm the first one to go 9 innings. And so, I think that's a good aspect of it when it remains friendly, which it very much is with this group as far as I can tell. And, I don't know that I'd bet on another shutout being thrown this year, but at least is now a possibility that exists in the Twins universe.
Or just a complete game.
Well, yeah. They went 5 years without a complete game.
I almost wondered the night before if we'd see Maeda come out in the 8th and 9th inning.
Yeah, they could have pushed him a little bit.
Yeah, they could have pushed him a little bit.
Under different circumstances if he wasn't coming back from injuries and all that. But yeah, they lead the majors in innings per start. And I know there is a certain segment of the fan base that will just never sort of let that information get into their brain, or and so we keep repeating it over and over. And they've dropped to third at times this year, but they're back up at number one because guys keep completing games, obviously. And it's remarkable to watch. And I do think right now, over these last couple weeks and going forward for the next several weeks, that's even more important than ever. That's always important to get 6 or 7 strong from your starter has been important for forever.
But right now,
especially when the bullpen is just taped together with, I don't even know. You got Jordan Balazovic's like their 7th inning reliever right now. You're hoping that Jorge Lopez comes back from his IL stint for mental health and can step back in. You're hoping, Emilio Pagan can't even be a low leverage guy right now because they just need him to get outs.
Right.
You got Oliver Ortega's trying to get outs, and then let alone, month and a half ago, people had questions about Griffin Jacks. Well, now there can't be any questions about Griffin Jacks. He's got to pitch the 8th inning.
Right, yeah, that's right.
And they were about to use him for the 3rd time in 4 games until they scored some runs late and they backed off.
They are at a point where if your starter doesn't go 7 innings,
it gets tricky.
It
gets very hairy in those 6th, 7th innings.
That's right, yeah.
Because, we saw it. They tried to patch it together in Baltimore, the game they won, actually. It was 1-0.
The loss, they also did it too.
Well, they tried to get Balazovic and Hedrick through an inning plus, basically. And Hedrick gave up a run, which, he's going to give up some runs. They just don't, whenever a bullpen, it's like a Jenga castle or whatever those call. You remove a piece and you hope that the whole thing doesn't collapse. And you can remove a piece or two from it, but like Brock Stewart had taken on such an outsized role or such an important role and had been so flawless basically for a month that, you remove that and you say, well, let's just move everybody else's spot. But you're also already out without Caleb Thielbar. Jorge Alcala hasn't been in the mix all season. You're out multiple guys who were going to be high leverage. And unfortunately, there weren't kind of prospects waiting in the wings like Bailey Ober, let's say, or Varland in the rotation. Brock Stewart was waiting in the wings as a minor league 30-year-old, 30-something signing, but there aren't. So now you're seeing Balazovic and Rocco Baldelli said a few days ago, we called up Jordan Balazovic just to provide some bulk innings in the bullpen as a long reliever, mop up, just to be a fresh arm for a few days. And he looked pretty good the first couple times we used him. And now relievers are just dropping like flies. And he said basically, usage-wise, we're going to scale him back to 1 inning, maybe 2 innings sometimes, because we need him to pitch in a medium leverage role, not a long relief or mop-up role. And
you can't be having guys from medium leverage or high leverage innings go multiple innings because then they're not available the next day.
Then they're not available, and then you got Oliver Ortega's pitching.
We saw it this week with Duran, right? That Sunday game, the one loss they've had in this last week, was they got through 6 innings with, was it Gray? It was Sonny Gray, right?
Yeah.
He just had trouble going.
In Atlanta.
In
Baltimore.
At Baltimore, right. Yeah. Oddly enough, has had trouble going past the 6th inning so far, right?
I've been saying for a year and a half that having interviewed Sonny Gray after every one of his target field starts, I've never heard him say, I agree with when I was taken out.
Right.
I've never heard him say that. It wasn't in Baltimore, but he said, man, I was gassed. It was hot. 6 innings was enough.
And so they're faced with 3 innings to try and hold a 1-0 lead. Right. And they come with it at Jacks at 7, Duran at 8, and we're all thinking, I think they were thinking, well, I think what Baldelli's hoping here is to get 2 innings from Duran. Well, instead, Duran runs into the 8th inning.
Right.
He still ends up throwing 30 pitches, so he can't actually finish the game,
right? And then he's
not available, for the first couple of games of the Kansas City series. And fortunately, they had enough awesome pitching performances versus the Royals that they gave almost everybody they got a complete rest on Wednesday. They have Thursday on an off day. They've got 3 days to play, and now they got a 4-day break.
It is amazing how Like, it is amazing how smart a manager can look when they get 7, let alone 9 good innings from a starting pitcher.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it is amazing the sort of decision tree that a manager has to go through during a game, how simplified and just straightforward it can get when it's not how do we get through these 6 outs until we hand it to Jax and Duran. It's just, well, now it's just Jax and Duran, or even better, well, just tell the bullpen not to even answer the phone if it rings.
Right.
Like, he's just got it under control. So that was huge from Pablo Lopez, obviously. I mean, the rotation just in general continues to be fantastic. I feel like with Lopez, we've talked going back a month or so that he hasn't been as sharp, but that his underlying metrics suggested that he was getting unlucky, not in the sense, I mean, a little bit in this sense, but not in the sense that, oh, every ball's blooping in for a hit. I mean, there's some of that, but more in the sense that he's giving up 6 hits in 6 innings and 5 of them are in the 5th inning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and so they cluster together, whereas if they were just distributed kind of evenly, you probably allow 1 run.
Right.
When they're distributed together,
I mean, similar to the complaints we used to have about Jose Barrios on a regular basis.
Yes, although I feel like his were tiring, where I don't get that sense from Lopez.
With Lopez, it happens in the first and second.
Well,
inning.
right, and often even if it's the 4th or 5th inning, he'll often stay in the game and then look better than ever to finish an outing.
Yes.
Whereas I think with Barrios, it was like 5th inning. You're going to let him face the top of the lineup again for a 3rd time, and now they got back-to-back doubles off him or whatever it is. There's some of that. But so now, as of today, the ERA is high 3s, where it should probably be low 3s, but he's, allowed 1 run in his last 15 innings. In terms of some other metrics that you would want to look at in terms, what's predictive more so than just an ERA, here's his ranking among American League starting pitchers right now. Pablo Lopez.
Yeah.
Number 2 in innings, number 2 in strikeouts, number 3 in expected ERA, number 4 in innings per start, number 5 in xFIP, number 6 in batting average against, number 7 in OPS against, quality starts, and strikeout to walk ratio. Yeah. Those are probably, 10 of the 12 metrics that I would ever look at, probably before ERA, if I'm being honest, to evaluate a starting pitcher. And he's like top 5 in some and top 10 in all. Yeah. That's a top 10 starting pitcher. Now, I know some people aren't as willing to just say his ERA doesn't matter and eventually that will even out, and that's fine. But he's got a 3.85 ERA, which is plenty good on its own. Right. And so I think, you're never going to get away from that trade being something that stings as long as Luis Arraez is hitting 390, which he continues to do. Right. But Pablo Lopez can't control that. And he was asked about that after the complete game. Like, do you feel extra motivation to try to, make that trade look good? And he said, look, I'm friends with Luis Arraez. Now we played for Venezuela together. I love what he's doing in Miami because I love Miami. I spent the last 5 years in Miami. Yeah. He's a cult hero in Miami and he deserves it. I can't do anything about that. And I'm certainly not going to root for him to play poorly so that I look better. But if you can separate that, Pablo Lopez has been everything the Twins could have possibly wanted. And, by the way, he's 27 years old, and they've signed him now to an extension that takes him through 2027. That's also a victory, given how good he's looked. Now, they got to keep him healthy and everything. Right. But he appears to certainly right now be a top, dozen starter in the American League. You can debate if that's a number 1 starter or whatever. But he's been excellent. And, similar to the offense being terrible, kind of overshadowing the pitching being great and keeping them from getting enough credit, I worry that people looking at box scores and seeing Luis Arraez go 3 for 5 every night in Miami is going to make them sort of, I'm not going to say dislike Pablo Lopez, but not have their full hearts and minds open to Pablo Lopez.
It was upsetting to lose Arraez in the first place. Right. So you already made up your mind at that point. Right. Yeah.
There's no room to be like, that was a great trade for the Twins.
Listen, the Miami Marlins, one of the things they've done pretty well in general is developed good starting pitchers. And you could take like Alcantara and Luzardo, both of which the Twins saw. You could still make a pretty good case that Pablo Lopez would be the best pitcher on the Marlins staff this year, had they not traded him.
Yeah. So he's been legitimately great. I think he's been good by like traditional metrics, numbers, and great by advanced metrics. And I
think this also plays a little bit into the thing we talked about earlier, which is because they're not hitting,
right,
you don't get as you don't get the praise around a lot of these members of this pitching staff.
When we talk
especially when you look forward to like the postseason, people are like, do we really have three guys that? Yeah, you've got three good guys who started a playoff series right now. You might not have the hitting to support those three guys, but you got three guys who you can count on to go out there and give you a decent chance of giving up like 3 runs or less.
Well, and a lot of when we talk about like Lopez's damage kind of clustering together, what that's led to over the last month, the previous month or so, has been 6 innings, 3 runs, or 6 innings, 4 runs. And unfortunately, when the lineup scores 2 runs in those games, you look at a 6-inning, 3-run performance from the starting pitcher, and you go, not good enough. He wasn't that good.
He gave up that blooping up last in the 3rd inning.
Meanwhile, the Twins, if they had scored 5 runs, you'd be going, man, Lopez pitched pretty damn well. Good, solid outing, got the win. And so that's, it's the Arise thing, it's the lineup, it all kind of plays into that. But man, the starting pitching has been good. And like you just said, there's been so many years, I'm not saying the Twins had spectacular offenses, although certainly 2019 they did, where even come mid-season, you look and you go, this is a pretty damn good lineup. Going back to the Mauer Morneau days, going back to even the Koski, Jock Jones, Torrey Hunter days, and certainly in 2019. But then you go, well, who the hell's starting playoff games for that team?
Right.
And you get into spots where it's Randy Dobnik or it's Brian Dunsing or whoever. And now it's the opposite problem, which is still a problem, and it's still something people are going to fret about.
Right.
But now it's who's starting a playoff game? Well, probably Sonny Gray, Pablo Lopez, and Joe Ryan, or maybe Bailey Ober. And now it's who's hitting in a playoff game? Right. Which I'm not saying that's any easier of a problem to solve.
Who's going to pitch? Who's going to hit versus some good pitching?
Right. Yeah. And I would, I guess, rather have the front line pitching and try to figure out a way to score 3 runs.
But that might just be because we've seen the other way for the last 20 years.
Yes. Before we talk about Royce Lewis and Jose Miranda and some other stuff, let's talk about our next couple of sponsors. BetterHelp, we've talked about before, which is basically they've taken the need for therapy or just to talk to somebody for whatever issue you're facing. If you just wake up one day and you say, man, I've been dealing with this for a while. I actually think today's the day to talk to somebody about it. It's often very difficult in sort of a traditional in-person setup to talk to somebody. That day is impossible. But even like that week, it's often impossible. The hurdles you have to jump through to get to that and the kind of barriers for entry. And
it can take months.
Yes.
It can take months to research and to find things and then to find somebody and do they have any space on their calendar.
And within that, there are some people who don't want to deal with this face-to-face. They'd rather talk on the phone or via text. And so BetterHelp has kind of removed a lot of barriers for entry. If you want to talk to real licensed therapists about whatever your issue is, you want to do a video chat with them, you can do a video chat within, 48, 72 hours usually. If you say, I don't want to be on video, you can just do an audio chat with them. If you say you're a weirdo like me and you hate talking on the phone, you could do a live chat with them. You can send emails with them, whatever it is. They will kind of customize it to whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you're dealing with. And our listeners can visit BetterHelp.com/Gleeman today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP, BetterHelp.com/Gleeman.
I've been traveling a lot, and it's nice to know that I've got the Game Time app on my phone because when I go to Philadelphia and I want to catch a Sunday game, it happens to be Philadelphia Phillies are drawing real well this year. Real well. And especially when they have a Father's Day promotion that they're giving away a free baseball hat. Oh, my God, is it hard to get tickets. But Game Time app came through for me, got tickets for me and my daughter's godparents as we went to the game. And that's because they're good at getting tickets. I mean,
their specialty is hard to find tickets, and just last minute tickets. So if you're like,
listen, I've used them for Twins games for 4 years.
Yeah, John has used it while literally walking to the ballpark.
I've used it in the bar outside the ballpark.
Well, I don't want to out you as an alcoholic, but yes, he's also done that too. The Game Time app, that's their specialty, and they also do concerts, shows, in addition to sporting events, obviously. So here's what you have to do. If you can snag tickets without the stress with Game Time, you just download the Game Time app wherever you get your apps, create an account, and then use the code Gleeman, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account on the Game Time app, redeem the code Gleeman for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. How many children Do you think you would? This is another example of you saying something offhandedly and me becoming interested in it. How many children do you think you would have had to have for me to be in a godparent situation?
Well, I didn't even know you till 2011,
so
12 or something like that. So it'd probably have been like 2014.
We talking 100 kids? If you had gotten to 100 children.
I would have had to get to 2014. So that's... And I started having kids at 97.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking I'm at least like 8 or 9 at that point.
Okay.
Like, right?
You're just running out of people at that. Yeah, like
yeah.
possibilities.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
that's
point.
about right. Yeah.
I think I would reject it. I would turn it down. I know better.
Who can I have as my daughter's spiritual guide?
Yeah, Aaron Gleeman.
Let's take the angry podcaster.
Yeah. It's good. Who doesn't leave his house? Yeah.
Well, that's actually not a bad counterbalance for us. Truth be told,
not leaving your house. Yeah, I always say between you and me, we go out an average amount.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
As a podcast, we go out an average amount. Yeah, I've never heard of a family member or a friend, getting pregnant or having a baby and thought, boy, I wonder if they'll come to me and Becky as the godparent.
I just became a godparent for the first time.
That's right.
3 months ago, something like that. Yeah.
No, that's all. I would argue also a mistake on their behalf.
That was pretty tragic mistake.
Yeah. Kid will grow up to be a brewer.
The good part about having me as a godparent is that Christy is also a godparent, and Christy will now obsess about your child.
Well, yeah.
That kid gets lots of presents.
I will not obsess about a child. I don't. No, don't care. I mean, I don't want them to live because I don't want to be blamed. But yeah, they're gonna learn by example more so than you know what I mean. Like
from a distance,
the hitters are not taking over the hitters meeting in this Godfather situation.
Right.
It's just
right.
I don't know. Yeah. You could text me once in a while. I got a problem. And 3 days later, I'll reply with a thumbs up emoji or something like that. If that helps you, then yeah, I'll be a good godparent.
You think you reply?
I do a thumbs up emoji. I'm good. I like that. Since that's been added to the text lexicon, it's really been helpful to me. Because a lot of times I'll get a text from John or anybody and I'll be like, I don't really know what to say to this. So I'll just wait, and 3 weeks pass. But if you can just send a thumbs up or prayer hands, that works too.
There you go, yeah.
Okay. So let's see. I mean, talk about Royce and Miranda. I mean, obviously, just off the top, it's very unfortunate with Royce Lewis, given all he's been through. Which is back-to-back season-ending knee injuries, 25 months worth of rehab involved in the two of them, to then come back and hit 326 in your first month back in the majors with a whole bunch of clutch hits, a whole bunch of game-changing moments. He was starting to look more and more comfortable at third base. He was starting to run a little bit. A spark for a lineup that desperately needed any
and bringing a different style to the lineup that we just spent two segments breaking down how important that new style or that sort of aggressive style was playing into what was otherwise seemed like to be a pretty passive lineup that didn't want to make adjustments. Here's a guy who clearly is not afraid to make adjustments.
And then he tweaks his side, run into first base, and is going to be out with an left oblique strain for 6 weeks. I would probably take the over on that, just given the history of oblique strains in Major League Baseball. Those tend to, we're seeing it with Caleb Thielbar, who's a pitcher, but tried to come back after 3 or 4 weeks and is now back on the IL for a month.
Yeah.
It created a situation where the default replacement as the only healthy infielder on the 40-man roster who wasn't already in the majors is Jose Miranda. And, we've been kind of updating his status at AAA over the past month or so. Every week or two, we talk about what he's doing at AAA, where he's playing. And he had started to perform better in the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to this.
Let's start the baseline. The baseline, he started terribly.
Yeah, he was terrible. Hit for no power at all.
And I don't mean in the majors. I'm talking about when he went down to St. Paul.
He was worse at St. Paul than he was in the majors, which got him demoted to St. Paul. Right. But over the last 20, 25 games there, he was hitting 310. He, the strikeout rate was low, which it usually is. He was drawing, a few walks, at least enough where you go, all right, he's taking some pitches. The power wasn't really there. I think he had 3 homers in 25 games or something like that. But you look and he had a, 840 OPS or something. He'd been playing mostly third, some first base, had a couple of, game-winning hits for them. Like if he if we didn't know the history of Jose Miranda and he were just some 25-year-old prospect at AAA, you'd go, yeah, this guy's playing pretty well. Yeah, let's put him in the call-up mix going forward. And that is sort of what happened, which is they then had a need-based situation.
He wasn't hitting so well that he'd push his way onto the roster, but he wasn't hitting so poorly that you would skip over him when you had an opening.
That's
on
exactly
the roster,
right. And so he gets called up, and it's been interesting to watch. I mean, it's only been a handful of games, obviously, but he's been their primary third baseman in place of Lewis, which was expected. But they've pinch hit for him a lot in like the 6th or 7th inning, and they've replaced him defensively when possible.
Right. Lots of moves defensively, actually, the last couple games.
I mean, with the pinch hitting and pinch running.
Some of them I thought were really actually kind of brilliant, but keep going.
Yeah, Baldelli's like a guy.
When Solano hit that double and then they pinch hit Taylor, and I took a look and I said, oh, that's the perfect move to make on defensively.
Yeah.
Like suddenly I've got Taylor playing center field, I got Castro over at third, I got Farmer back at second base. All the things that had been I kind of worried about in the starting lineup with Castro at center field and Julian at second base and Solano at third base. I was like, boy,
they finished the Lopez shutout with I would say the best possible defensive
It was beautiful.
And that's one of those things that looks great until it doesn't
until they score, and then you've got
then
you got Michael Taylor.
Exactly. I'm going to put this in terms that I think you will definitely understand, which is when you're out for a night of drinking and you think, I kind of got to go to the bathroom. And you think, don't do it. As soon as you break that seal, you're going to be peeing all night after that.
Okay.
And I feel like that's the point Baldelli has gotten to with the in-game moves. He went 2-3 years.
Yeah.
He could just sit on his hands and let the Bomba squad go to work, right? I mean, he's even talked jokingly about that. Yeah. He said, I show up here as a manager and we hit 350 homers. It's not that much to do, really. Yeah. He started to then last couple of years pinch hit a little bit, but this year he's got the second most pinch hit appearances. He's pinch running for guys. He's replacing them defensively.
Definitely defensive replacements. Like that's what started the whole thing. The seal was broken on Wednesday when after Julian got picked off of first base.
Right.
Then he came back out to play, so it wasn't punishing that or something.
Till the 6th.
Till the very next inning after that, where it's like, I don't think I want to see Julian at second base anymore. So let's bring in Farmer. He'll play third. We'll put Solano at second base, which doesn't necessarily help you at second base, but it helps you at third base.
But then Farmer did bat at least once in that spot.
Yeah.
And that's the difference to me is like I have no problem with defensive replacements. In general, I think people focus too much on the upside of them versus the downside of them.
Yes.
But
I agree.
If you're going to make them in the 8th or 9th inning, or when it's not, just numbers wise, it's less than a 50% chance that spot in the lineup is going to come up again.
Right.
Well, then by all means, if you got a 2-run lead,
when you make him that earlier, Farmer's getting an at bat,
and he might get 2 at bats. We've seen that.
True,
I mean, he's removed Julian in the first inning.
I don't know enough about their lineup to know whether or not that, because I was surprised. I was surprised when I saw Farmer out there because I was like, I haven't seen a left-handed reliever. Why is Farmer out there?
Right.
Defense. It was defense.
So now they have 2 of their 4 starting infielders are guys who they want to remove defensively, which is interesting. Yeah. I don't think that's real sustainable necessarily. But, I mean, that kind of speaks to where Miranda stands now with them, which is theoretically he's got a month and a half here or more, unfortunately, it could be longer, to kind of reestablish his value in the Twins' mind or hit his way back into their plans. And it's going to have to be offensively. But
that's got to
his
happen.
stock had dropped so much that they're going to pinch hit for him and pinch run for him and defensively replace him. He's not going to be viewed as the guy he was at the beginning of the season, which is this guy plays every day. This guy, you know.
He's one of the top 4 guys in our lineup. He's part of our core.
And that's
he's middle of the lineup guy.
I mean, he performed his way into that, obviously. But then the question becomes, let's say 2 weeks from now, he's not really been any better offensively than he was early in the season, and he's still weak contact and too many double plays, and they're
hitting like Kyle Farmer, only without the defense.
It's exactly right. So then do they kind of decide, look, we got another 3, 4, 5 weeks here with somebody else playing third base instead of Royce Lewis. Do we want to continue down this path with Miranda? Are we, A, helping ourselves, or B, are we doing him any favors by kind of putting him back into that position before he had really kind of gotten fully back on track at AAA, if that was going to happen at AAA? In which case, you could send him back to AAA. You could go with Farmer and Willie Castro at third base instead of him. The other thing is, Castro can play pretty much anywhere, but has been primarily an outfielder for them. A lot of left field. Well, if you want to make him your third baseman, and he's been playing almost every day in the outfield anyway, so what's the difference? If you want to make him your third baseman, then it could be Larnach in left field. It could be Wallner in left field on those days. And I know they have Gallo.
Could be a trade deadline acquisition.
Well, it could be a trade deadline. But also Nick Gordon. If Nick Gordon beats Royce Lewis back, he could be in the mix there at some point. Yep. So I think there's I mean, we talked about this when they sent Miranda down, how he gets back into the fold, because 2 weeks after they sent him down, Royce Lewis took over at third base. It's possible Royce Lewis is the third baseman for the next decade. And if he's not, if he goes to center field or he goes to second base or whatever it is, it's possible that Brooks Lee is just the third baseman in the middle of next year or whatever, or Austin Martin or whatever. And so it's possible that door long term has already kind of closed for Miranda. In which case, then you really have to hit your way into the first base DH situation. But whether it's long term, whether it's short term, whether it's third base, first base, whatever, it all boils down to he's just got to hit. And in the short term, filling in for Lewis, he's going to get an opportunity. But I just wonder, how long is the runway here? Like how long before they say, not we're giving up on him completely, although they could do that. But how long before they say
of options left?
Yeah, I mean they can, but I mean he could be trade bait or whatever. Yes. How long before they just say, look, he actually hadn't been that amazing at AAA, like you said. He hadn't pushed his way back to the majors. He had just gotten to a level where, if needed, he could be called back. And how long before they say it's not happening yet? Like maybe it'll happen later, but we'll see. And so that's kind of what I'm wondering about.
Your suggestion he could be trade bait is an interesting one too.
I mean, I don't think he's going to have a huge trade value, but certainly they could trade him
potentially. I mean, it could be. I mean, it is sort of interesting to see what its trade value would be. It's just what we've seen from this year. A lot of what you're saying isn't that we don't know if he's going to be good enough to be in the majors. It's just sort of like we're not really sure where he fits, right? And
I mean, I think he's a major league player. It's just, is he a platoon?
If you would have tried to trade him in March, you'd have had a huge market for him.
Well, what I really wonder about, and this was not going to happen, obviously, but what I really wonder about is what was his value last trade deadline relative to Spencer Steer, Encarnacion Strand, fill in the blank there. Like, what could he have fetched from a pitching standpoint? But I mean, I get nobody was calling for that to happen, obviously, but that's, I don't know, that's the unfortunate thing. When you're I just feel like maybe we are. Listen, he's had just such a dismal year. I don't want to say we're overreacting to a dismal year, right? But I wonder for two guys that tend to be sort of, here's what this guy has been, and look at multiple years of history and so on. How much are we overreacting to, 3 really crummy months or 4 really crummy months? Now, it's worth pointing out he wasn't all that great 6 months out of 6 months last year. He had he had ups and downs. He was bad in September.
He had terrible on his first call up and bad in September, and in the middle he had one phenomenal month.
In the prospect world, a guy like Miranda is called a helium prospect, which is he's kind of chugging along in the low minors. He gets to AA. Some people like him, some don't. The numbers aren't great, and then all of a sudden, after working behind the scenes in 2020, he has that breakout 2021 season. Minor League Player of the Year. He was one of the great seasons in Twins history. He hit 350 with 30-something homers.
Started 2022 the same way in the minors. Right. Yep.
When a guy kind of, not comes out of nowhere, but has that big jump up 1 year, and then 18 months later, you're looking at him and you go, was he ever actually that good? Like, how long are we waiting for that to duplicate itself? Or that guy from that 1 year to re-show himself. Now, he did it in the majors for a few months, but early on and late wasn't that great. And also, part of the problem with him is the bar for his offense has to be high because he's either going to be a poor defensive third baseman or a DH or a first baseman. So, but that's why Royce Lewis, it's a shame for him, for the Twins. I also don't know that Miranda is kind of ready for this spotlight again quite yet. I think 3 weeks later, maybe if he put together a bigger stretch at AAA, it would have. I agree with you. But you can't choose when a guy's going to get an oblique injury.
I will say this: we were just talking about the Twins having a more aggressive style, and how much that hurt that Royce Lewis was somebody who seemingly made adjustments or something. Miranda, at the least, has a pretty aggressive style up there. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I don't know. His might need to be the opposite way.
He is a great example, along with the Cleveland Guardians are a really good example that we always cite too, which is everyone hates strikeouts. And everyone looks at the Twins and go, well, they're on a record-setting strikeout pace. If only they could decrease the strikeouts, the offense would really click. And you go, well, yeah, there's some truth to that, obviously. But Cleveland has struck out the fewest times in baseball, I think. And they have a worse offense than the Twins. Right. And that's where Miranda, unfortunately, has trended, which is the quality of contact has been so poor that the contact itself loses value as like a skill or a tool.
Right. Yes.
And he's got to get around that. Like, chopping the ball to second base or shortstop on the third pitch of an at-bat.
Right.
Yeah, you didn't strike out, but it's not good in a lot of situations because of how slow he is. Right. It's a double play.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's got to elevate the ball. He's got to hit the ball harder, or they're going to move on this season and maybe in the future, because if you can't outperform a veteran good glove role player, whether it's Farmer, Castro, whoever, it's going to be really it's just tricky to stick with you. Before we get, let's see, I had a couple other little notes here to get to. There's a lot, actually, because we've been 2 weeks, but some of this stuff has been covered on the Patreon. I just wanted to, before we get to our last sponsor, which we will, there's only one more, but Sonny Gray named to the All-Star team.
Yeah.
Third All-Star appearance,
with 3 teams. Yeah, that's cool.
He's an interesting guy because he day to day he either really wants to break down his performance or not at all. He either really is excited to talk about being an All-Star or not at all. But I think that trade, the Chase Petty, who was the Twins' first-round pick in 2021 for Sonny Gray 2 springs ago, is an example of the good version of what the Twins have tried to do a lot on the starting pitching front, which is we haven't been able to develop our own Sonny Grays because of injuries or poor development or whatever. We're willing to pay these premium price tags for veteran frontline starting pitchers, which is the single most expensive player type on the trade market.
Sure.
Always.
Yes.
Every year.
Yep.
Every decade, every year. And some teams, for that reason, just completely shy away from it.
And in fact, not just a rental.
Right.
But guys with extra years of...
He had 2 full years when they traded for him, and they essentially traded their first-round pick. Right. He had pitched 5 innings in the minors, but an 18-year-old hard-throwing high school pitcher, Chase Petty, 26th overall pick, 9 months earlier. So you essentially traded a first-round pick for 2 years of a 32-year-old, I guess at the time, Sonny Gray, and you pay him $25 million for those 2 years too. And that has worked out about as well as it could work out from the Sonny Gray standpoint. Now, Chase Petty may go on to have a Hall of Fame career. Who knows? Right. But that's an example of their willingness to kind of to pay the price for veteran starting pitchers. That's the good version of it, which is you're giving up something good.
Sure.
They're under no notion that Chase Petty is valueless or that their first round pick, regardless of who it was valueless. Right. But it's like if we can get 2 all-star caliber years from Sonny Gray, yeah, that's fine. We're willing to trade 6 years of Chase Petty's future for 2 years of that. We've then seen versions of that same sort of thinking with Tyler Mahle. It was a year and a half of Tyler Mahle. They traded Steer and Encarnacion Strand for him. Well, that's the opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
That's horrible. Yep. Within that, we have the Pablo Lopez for a rise version, which is not on the good side yet, but I think closer to the middle ground right now. Right. Certainly. We'll see. Time will tell. And then you have Maeda Graterol, which that one's tricky to evaluate too, because right away it looked great. Maeda finished runner-up for the Cy Young in 2020, but that was the 60-game season. Right. Graterol has the reason they were willing to trade Graterol, who was a top 100 prospect, 100-mile-an-hour, 21-year-old, because they believed he was going to end up as a reliever. Right. And once they determined his upside was a good reliever, not a good starter, they were willing to trade him for a good starter. Right. But then Maeda has the one really good season in the abbreviated year. Obviously, the fact that it was abbreviated was not his fault or the Twins' fault. Right. And then struggles through most of 2021, undergoes Tommy John surgery, misses the end of 2021, all of 2022, and is now coming back, which we'll talk about in a minute, how he's looked. Meanwhile, Graterol has become a pretty good reliever for the Dodgers, but he's been banged up, and he doesn't really strike anybody out, despite a 102-mile-an-hour fastball. And so you look at it and you go, well, Maeda showed them the frontline starter they thought they were getting, but it was really briefly, and now they're hoping at the tail end of this, because he's an impending free agent, he'll be a valuable contributor to a playoff team again. Brusdar Graterol is valuable, but not so much that you go, oh man, I can't believe they gave up Brusdar Graterol.
Right. That's right.
And so these are sort of...
You get also Odorizzi and Palacios.
Well, that one worked out
that one also worked out.
Although even that one, they brought back Odorizzi, and then he was terrible for $17 million or whatever the second time around.
But they also brought back Palacios.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, that's true. So that's the spectrum of like, they're coming into these like pitching trades eyes wide open.
Yeah.
They know you have to pay $1.50 on the dollar for it. Your hope is that you actually do get the dollar return, and that, you know, maybe it ends up being $1.25 that you gave up long term instead of $1.50 or something like that.
I mean, listen, all of these trades are a gamble. If you're afraid to gamble, you don't want to make this trade.
Well, right.
And they've got examples from where it totally worked out to when it totally did not work out, and they got all of them in between.
Well, and then obviously the Joe Ryan aspect, which is a different scenario, which is you trade away 2 months of Nelson Cruz for a AAA pitcher, Joe Ryan, which is now looking like one of the best trades in Twins history.
Yeah, but then you also got the Jose Barrios trading away one of those pitchers.
That's true. Barrios just threw it 7 one-hit innings the other day.
He suddenly seems to have bounced back after a really tough year and a half or year plus with Tampa. But I mean, we're worried about the two prospects that we got back in return for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on much value from that trade, it looks like, unfortunately. Before we talk about Maeda and we finish up with a couple of notes here, let's just do our last sponsor, which is Stamps.com. I always talk about how I used Stamps.com for months at a time. 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote a book, and I stupidly said, hey, I got a bunch of copies of this book that they sent me. If you guys give me $20, I'll autograph it and send it to you. And I thought, 40 people will do that. And instead it was like, 850 people or something. Yeah. And so all of a sudden my living room turned into a production facility and a mailing facility.
But even if you're not doing something like that, I can guarantee you, like, one of your least favorite... I'm not saying you. I'm saying to our listener.
But
you,
me
dear
also,
listener, one of your least favorite place to spend any afternoon
the post
is
office.
the post office, right?
In line at the post office.
With my son being in Japan, I've been thinking back a lot to my time in the Soviet Union. People are like, what was it like being in the Soviet Union? My response was, you know what it's like being in the post office where nobody really seems to care whether or not the line moves or not? Yeah. It was like that, like 24 hours a day in the Soviet Union.
Stamps.com can save you from that, whether it's just, day-to-day stuff, you mail 1 or 2 things a week, or you've got a project that you've got yourself into like I did where you're mailing out 50 things every morning. You can avoid a million trips to the post office. You can actually save money because you can be more precise with your shipping.
Right.
Because as we're just about to say,
it's an incredible deal.
There's a trial set where they'll send you a digital scale that you can actually weigh and put the correct postage instead of just slapping on $5 worth of postage.
Yeah, so avoid the hassle and get started with Stamps.com today. You just sign up with the promo code GEEK, not Gleeman, GEEK, for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, and then you click a microphone on the top of the page, and you enter the code GEEK. Stamps.com.
Okay. So we mentioned Maeda. He's made 3 starts since coming off the IL for the second time. He's looked good.
17 innings, 3 runs, and 21 strikeouts, right?
Yeah, a lot of swings and misses. The thing we've talked about with him, even at his best, is he was never a guy for whom velocity was the leading indicator of, how things are going.
Sure.
And even in his runner-up Cy Young season, he was 91, 92. Now, there is a big difference between 91, 92 with your fastball and 88, 89 with your fastball. It may not seem like a big difference, but when you're 91, 92 in the year 2023 is already pretty far down or pretty high up there on the degree of difficulty scale. It requires, to succeed as a starting pitcher in the year 2023, throwing 91, 92, it requires really good control, really good command, multiple good off-speed pitches that you can throw against lefties and righties, a little bit of veteran guile, all this stuff, which he had in spades, obviously. You can still do that at 88, 89, but you really need to be just absolutely thriving. You have to be 100th percentile.
You have to be a duelist. Yeah, right.
And so I think what we saw from him, the first time around is he had the one really good start in Miami. Then his stuff kind of ticked back a little bit to the point he was, topping out at 90 instead of averaging 90. And the command and the control just weren't there, and he got knocked around. Obviously, the big one was against the Yankees. They just let him eat he gave up 10 runs. Right. They let him eat it. But if you take out that one start against and then he gets hit in the ankle the next time out or whatever.
Right,
but if you take out that one start against the Yankees, which, that counts too, so believe me.
Right, yeah.
But he's got a 5.25 ERA or something. If you take out that one 10-run start against the Yankees, he's made 5 starts this season. He has a 2.70 ERA with 33 strikeouts and 6 walks. Well, that's what you need to see, which is he needs to rarely walk anybody. Right. That's one guy per start, basically, that he's walking. He needs to pound the strike zone, but not with middle pitches. Right. Because the problem throwing 90 is...
He is not a make contact guy.
Right. You're trying to avoid contact. You're trying to get swings and misses with your breaking ball, with your split, change, all that stuff. And the secondary pitches, I mean, he still is only averaging 90, 91 miles an hour. Right. And he jokes after every start, people say, were you happy with the velocity? He's like, yeah, but I'm hoping it ticks back up to 95. He always says that. Yeah, and it'd be great if it ticked back up to 92, which is more realistic.
Right.
But he can live at 90 if everything else is clicking perfectly.
Right.
And it wasn't clicking perfectly at times. That's why he went on the IL. And it's been much closer to the ideal in the 3 starts since then. The concern is, how long physically can this last? Because any slip in that or any fatigue or any, whatever leaves him without any margin for error.
Fortunately, after those 3 starts, he's got a little bit of a break here. I will be interested to see how they set up the rotation coming back.
Oh, he'll definitely pitch 5th coming out of the break, I bet.
So, I mean, that gives him almost 2 weeks off, right? Because he last pitched Tuesday, right? He wouldn't pitch until probably Wednesday the following week or Tuesday the following week then. Yeah. So that's almost 2 weeks off if he does that.
He won't pitch till in Seattle? Would it be?
Yeah.
It's Oakland
and
Seattle.
Yeah, 3 games in Seattle. And I don't think there's a break on that Monday. So, it would be Tuesday. It would be the next day that he would pitch. Tuesday to Tuesday. That's a 2-week break.
Yeah,
because otherwise, if they just kept exactly the rotation or exactly the order that they have right now, he'd be pitching on Friday, right? It would have been his turn on Monday, except that's when the
My prediction coming out of the break is that it'll be Lopez, Ryan, Gray, Ober, Maeda. That's having given that
do it right back
5 seconds of thought. Because I think they might have led with Gray, except he's going to go to the All-Star game, and I don't think he'll pitch because he's going to pitch Saturday, so he'll likely be unavailable.
Oh, yeah.
Although he said he would like to pitch an inning, but he's never pitched in the All-Star game. But the guys who pitch over the weekend tend not to be available in the All-Star game. But I think just from going to the All-Star game, they'll want to give him a break as long as they can.
This weekend, Sonny Gray is pitching Saturday.
Yes, and Joe Ryan is pitching Sunday. Okay, but it doesn't matter as much because
I wouldn't be shocked if it was.
I mean, here's the beauty of the rotation, John.
If they go, I know.
We just talked about this. It doesn't matter.
I know.
I mean, the front 4, it certainly doesn't matter.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of keep the same rotation more or less, but they bump Gray back and they bump Maeda back, right?
We got to be the only podcast where we both agree it doesn't matter, and we spent 9 minutes talking about it. Cutting it off at the...
Okay.
Let's see. A few under my miscellaneous tab here. I think we've talked about everything I definitely want to talk about. I have a note here. Tell John he looks handsome today. You look handsome today.
Do I?
It's not really. I thought, why not? There's a draft. Now, Sunday night, they have the 5th pick. I think it starts at 7 our time, so somewhere around.
We also talked about this a little bit more on the page.
We're going to have to rely on that as our draft coverage. I mean, I've written 3 articles about it, so people can read that.
Let's give them the Cliff Notes version.
The Cliff Notes version is that the Twins were supposed to pick 13th. There was the first ever, the inaugural MLB draft lottery at the winter meetings in December that I had the good fortune to witness. One of the most boring events I've ever seen. It was just about 50 writers milling around a conference room while they went, number 5, Minnesota Twins. No reaction. Okay. Well, I guess I have to write about that. They jumped up 8 spots, which was the most of any team, to number 5. And even back then, it was considered a really deep, good, class in terms of frontline talent. Once the college season started, almost any article or any person you talk to about the draft class, they would say it's a 5-player draft.
Right.
There's 3 exceptional college players, Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens from LSU, Wyatt Langford, who's a outfielder from Florida, who was the runner-up to LSU in the College World Series. Right. So everyone got a chance if they wanted to watch the 3 best players really in the draft. And then 2 high school guys, Max Clark, who's kind of a leadoff type of center fielder, left-handed hitter, and Walker, I can't think of his name now. Walker Jenkins.
Yes.
Oof, I've written about these guys a million times. Walker Jenkins, who's a more of a prototypical right field slugger type of left-handed hitter, high school players. And so it's great to pick 5th in a 5-player draft, quote unquote. But there's been a bunch of articles written, some who say they have sources, some who are just going off other people's mock drafts and stuff like that, that the kind of storyline becomes, well, will the Twins draft a high school guy? You know, it's great to say you pick 5th in a 5-player draft, just draft whoever's left. Right. Which, yeah, I do think that's probably the approach they ought to take. But if who's left is a 17-year-old outfielder from high school, are they going to do that? They've really never done that since Royce Lewis out of high school.
Since
they've taken a lot of college bats. Now, does that mean they only want to take college bats, or does it mean
that they were never drafting 5th in a 5-person draft with a premier high school outfielder?
And so I do think the idea of, you know, if one of the 2 high school outfielders is the guy available at number 5, which I do expect to be the case. It's not locked in, but I do expect that to be the case.
Nobody really expects any of the 3 college players to fall to number 5.
No, and if
in fact, I'm not sure you may expect them to fall past, 3, but maybe 4.
If they do, it'll be because their bonus demands are very high, and you might initially think to yourself, well, that probably rules out the Twins too, but the Twins have $14.3 million to spend on their draft picks this year because they have not only the number 5 pick, but 2 other top 50 picks, and their bonus pool is the 4th largest. So if one of the 3 college guys slips because they're asking for $9-10 million or more, the Twins could potentially do that and try to save money with their other picks.
Essentially kind of moving up from 5 to 3.
From what I've been able to gather, talking to people behind the scenes, and also we interviewed Sean Johnson, who's their VP of amateur scouting. He's the guy who's going to make the pick. Publicly, I wrote a bunch of stuff with his quotes in it if people want to read that for The Athletic. I'm not saying that they wouldn't prefer a college player, all things being equal. I just think the assumption that they will pass on a consensus higher upside high school player to take a higher floor, lower upside college player is faulty. I think it's based too much on their previous picks, which is a pretty small sample. Like, does the fact that 5 of their 9 first-round picks have been college hitters mean that going forward they're 60% likely to prefer a college hitter? Or does it just mean there were a couple picks in there where they just had a college guy rated ahead? That's sort of been their stance, is like, yes, we would prefer college hitters, but we're not in a spot where we're dropping high school guys 10 spots just because they were in high school, basically. But we'll see.
I mean, listen, the Twins have certainly shown that this front office has certainly shown that tendency, right? But like, as you point out, there's a big difference between. That doesn't mean that we're blacklisting every high school hitter.
I've had members of the Twins draft crew, let's say to me, like, this is not reality. Like, if you see on some mock draft that, like, you know, they're talking about models and, you know, the Twins only like college hitters in the not the case. I mean, they're scouting the hell out of these high school guys. They've seen these guys a bunch, especially these 2 guys have been at the top of the class for the whole, 6 months now or longer. I think if one of the college guys drops to them at 5, they'll take them. If it's one of the 2 or 2, both of the high school guys, I think it's not 100%, but I still do think they're going to wind up with one of the top 5 in a 5-player draft. But it's not kind of set in stone.
The proof will be in the pudding on Sunday night, right? I mean, there's certainly reasons for the Twins to misrepresent their position, whether it's to you or whether it's to somebody on the side to try and drive it a different way, right? Like, if they are in negotiations with, listen, they are absolutely have talked to all of these players about what their salary demands are going to be. All teams know what the bonus
demands are for all players at this point.
Right.
That's a huge part of the baseball thing. I mean, it's not as simple as best player on your board in baseball.
Right.
Because there are no trades. You can't trade up or down in baseball.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is, to get as close to the effect of trading up or down, like in the NBA or NFL or whatever, you can't just have the 5th pick and go, oh, we'd rather trade for the 9th pick and a 2nd-round pick or something like that. You can't do that in baseball. What you can do is, instead of taking the 5th-rated player with the 5th pick and paying them the full slot bonus amount or more, you could, let's say, take the 9th-rated player with the 5th pick, pre-negotiate a deal that's for $5 million instead of $7 million, and then redistribute that extra $2 million to your next pick,
Your 24th overall pick,
right, which is also a high pick. They have two other top 50, 34th and 49th, I think I want to say. And so then you can effectively trade up with those picks. So you go like from 5 to 9, you end up with a top 10 guy. Then you can use that extra $2 million, tack it onto the whatever $2 million that's the slot amount for the 34th pick, and essentially move up to 24, where you're trying to then get someone who was rated 16th, who fell to 24 because of the exact same bonus situation.
That's right.
Now, it's not guaranteed. You have to very much react in real time to that, but it's not a complete crapshoot because every team knows what every guy's bonus demands are at this point. Every guy has told every team, unless you're going to pay me this amount, don't draft me. I'll go to college. I'll, whatever.
I think Julian is an example of that. Right? Julian's like a 17th round pick who ended up getting like second round money.
I mean, there are tons
third
of
round money.
Carlos Correa was drafted first overall. Now, they may have done that anyway, but he was drafted first overall in part because they saved money, quote unquote, to then give to Lance McCullers in the second round and get a first round talent in the second round. And just to be clear, when I say saves money, the Twins' total available slot bonus pool
is all going to be spent.
Is $14.3 million. They will spend it. It's just, how is it spent? Are you spending $7 million on the number 5 pick and $7 million total on everyone else, or are you spending $5 million on the number 1 pick and $9 million on the other guys to try to move your way up and down? We'll talk about that a lot Monday.
Yes,
because the draft is
on the Patreon.
Patreon.
So next, we should just kind of give a heads up on what we're planning on doing next week. We've got Patreon on Monday where we will recap the Baltimore Orioles series. We'll talk about this draft pick. Wednesday, we're during the All-Star break. If you're looking for some baseball talk, we're going to be doing a mailbag. So if you join the Patreon.com by Tuesday, probably, I send out the mailbag call. You get the inbox to be send your question in, and we tried to do a whole mailbag episode on Patreon that you can listen to on Wednesday, and then we'll be back Friday again with the free show. We're trying to decide what we're going to cover on Friday.
Maybe a little bit of first half review, second half look ahead with maybe some trade deadline, because at that point we'll be about 2.5 weeks out from the trade deadline,
might be
which is was sneaking up on us in a hurry. Okay, that's probably it. I got more, but.
You've had enough of it.
One thing I want to note, because I looked this up. I was watching Greinke in the middle game of the Royal Series have a bad start and then leave with an injury, so that might be his. That might be it for him. Because he's
what happened? So I didn't see what
he just got his shoulder or something.
In the middle of the game, he kind of had a check-in with the trainer on like the third inning or
he's
something.
He's 1,000 years old and he throws 86 miles an hour. It's like Maeda. At some point, it's like, well, yeah. But I looked it up because I was like, man, I've watched Greinke face the Twins a lot, obviously. Yeah. So I looked, Target Field starts. He's third all time in starts by an opponent at Target Field.
Target Field, okay.
The first two, he has 12, so that's third most all time. Number 1 is, well, you call him Rick Porcello. His name's Rick Porcello, who's I don't know if he's retired, but he's out of baseball. He had 14 because he was on those Tigers teams for the whole time. And then number 2 is Verlander, who is also on those Tigers teams, with 13. And then you get to Greinke. Now, I'm of the opinion that Zach Greinke should be a Hall of Famer. It's not a slam dunk case, but, he's a Cy Young winner. He's probably got a handful of All-Star. He's been a top 10 pitcher for most of his career. Not lately, obviously.
Is he only one Cy Young one?
I think. Maybe he won 2. He won 1 with the Royals.
Yeah.
And maybe he won 1 with the Diamondbacks? I don't know. He finished like top 3 a few times probably. But then I looked. I thought, well, what? I don't know that I've ever seen him dominate the Twins at Target Field in the games I've been at. And I looked. 12 starts at Target Field. 1 in 9 with a 6.50 ERA at Target Field. Yeah. It's a very strange thing to know in real time that you're looking at a Hall of Famer, because he was a top prospect. Right. He was great at 22 years old. You knew every time he took the mound for the against the Twins at Target Field, I'm watching a guy who's really, upper echelon. And then to watch them just get knocked around pretty consistently during that time, obviously of late especially, to watch kind of a Hall of Famer go 1 in 9 with a 6.50 ERA in a dozen starts at Target Field, it has been kind of a weird experience, because it's just like, theoretically, I'm shouldn't be a supporter of his Hall of Fame candidacy.
Right.
Because every time I watch him against the Twins, he gets the snot kicked out of him.
Now, this is Target Field or is it
Target Field.
the Metrodome?
Yeah. No, Target Field.
See, I think part of my perception of Greinke being a great pitcher is because he was so good at the Metrodome. I mean, that was when he had so many of those years with the Royals, right? Like, I thought the one time I remember them, it felt like, when was it? The year that it was 2010. No, it was 2009. 2009 when they ended up beating the Royals in that series, and I think they beat Greinke either in the second game or the third game of the final series, and they ended up tying Detroit to end up causing that extra postseason game. Like, I remember thinking, oh, we finally got to Greinke. Now, maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe he was not nearly as dominant as I remember in the Metrodome. But that is sort of where my perception of was he was really good up until like that point, and then after they beat him in what that was kind of a critical game, not so much for the Royals, but for the Twins. He was just a little bit. Less dominant.
Here's the thing, John. I can look this up. I guess Metrodome, 4.03 ERA at the Metrodome.
That's not bad. I mean, that's not great.
5-16 versus the Twins' first career at all
2004 through 2009, which was the thing. His overall ERA was 3.73, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't great immediately, but I don't know. It's just a little weird note. Like,
well, 2009 when they, if I remember that detail correctly, that they beat him on that final weekend as one of the critical games they needed to tie Detroit for the division lead. That was the year he won the Cy Young.
It's just weird to be like, there are certain guys, you know, you say, who's killed the Twins at the Target Field? It's like, you know, Jose Bautista. It's Salvador Perez.
Right.
Donaldson killed them before they got Donaldson, and then killed them.
Yeah.
While he was on the team too. But then there's certain guys where you're like, Zach Greinke, amazing, Hall of Famer. He would get my vote. Actually, I'll probably maybe have a vote by the time he's on the ballot. Just terrible against the Twins at Target Field. It's a weird. This is kind of, we talk a lot about like being careful to thin slice sample sizes and then draw conclusions for them, whether it's like lefty righty splits or home road. You know, why is Pablo Lopez so much better on the road? Well, it's been 15 starts and you're trying to break it down into 7. And so it's like when you start to take a guy's Hall of Fame career and you're breaking it down not just by opponent, but like Metrodome, Target Field, you know, all this stuff. And it's like the thinner you slice, and I think this is a good takeaway just when you're trying to analyze splits in general, the thinner you slice, the less meat there is to put in a sandwich.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
that's
that's a horrible analogy, but you get the idea. And this one, I looked it up, and I'm expecting to see, you know, he's 10-2 against the Twins or something like that. It's like, oh no, he's been horrendous against the Twins.
He's also one of those guys where I was looking back at his career, I'm kind of surprised he never actually pitched for the Twins. Even early on in his career, he always felt like
last offseason, two off seasons ago.
That's right.
They pursued him, and he turned down money from the Twins and some other contending teams
to go to the Royals,
just to go back to the Royals and basically finish his career with the Royals. Which, yeah, that's fine too.
Yeah. But he was like when Tomei finished his career with the Twins, I kind of expected. I was like, that seems about right.
Yeah.
Like at some point, he was beloved even when he was on the opposite side, and he always killed us and such. And you're like, we should. And Greinke used to talk, as I recall, early in his career, he used to talk about how like the Twins are always a good organization or something like that.
I saw when Detroit was in town, I was in the elevator with one of their announcers, Craig Monroe, who was a corner outfielder for the Tigers, right-handed hitting corner outfielder.
I didn't know he was one of the
and he was nice, and he killed the Twins every year. Yeah. And then they signed him to like a 1-year deal near the end of his career. And I remember at the time, I guess it was Terry Ryan who signed him, maybe Bill Smith, them saying like, well, you know, he really likes playing here. He's just, you know, killed us for years and years. And I thought, well, he doesn't get to face you guys anymore, right? Like, you know that. That was the thing with Rondell White too. I remember,
right? Yeah.
Oh, he killed us. And it's like, well, yeah, but that actually has less value because he's never going to face you now again. That was always funny when even at the Carlos Correa press conference, the notion with Carlos Correa wasn't that he kills the Twins. It was that he really loves hitting at target field, and that played a part in his initial signing 2 springs ago.
Right.
And I believe that. I mean, I believe he might have said to Scott Boras, what are the ballparks I really have thrived in? Because, if I'm going to sign a 1-year deal, which he did with the Twins, I'd like to be at a place that I like the hitter's background. I've had success there. The power alleys are good for my swing and all that.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, target field, yeah, right-handed power hitter,
Sure.
whatever, they should fit there. But I wanted to be, I didn't say this because I didn't want the wrath of Scott Boras, but I wanted to be like, yeah, is that target field or is that facing the Twins pitching as a member of the Astros who regularly put up 10 spots at target field or 20 spots for that matter?
Whole Astros hit at target field. So did most of the American League.
Right. Craig Monroe. I mean, just go down the...
We're suddenly a hitter's park.
I always thought that was interesting.
Speaking of the park, we got the Baltimore series coming up here. I was listening to most of those games with the Baltimore announcers, and one of the things they were talking about a lot with the games in Baltimore is, they moved those fences back.
Oh my God!
In left field,
they
right?
Shot them back 50 yards.
And the announcers were chuckling a little bit about how Twins still haven't figured out you can't hit it out to left field anymore.
They haven't figured that out in general for 5 years. But
the interesting thing about that is target field plays exactly the opposite as Camden in that way, right? That right field is going to be real hard to hit out at target field. It traditionally is very difficult to hit it out to right field, whereas it's very easy to hit it out to left field. So I'll be interested to see how those three games match these 3 games in terms of what happens on long fly balls, and do the Orioles pitchers who probably feel pretty comfortable with fly balls to left field feel a lot less comfortable maybe pitching inside to right-handers. Yeah. And one of the other narratives that came out of that is that the Twins basically did not throw fastballs to the Orioles for 3 days.
I mean, the Twins don't throw fastballs in general, really.
A lot of them don't, right? But even Bailey Ober threw threw like 5 fastballs to the entire Orioles lineup, something like that. Sonny Gray also threw very few fastballs. Sonny Gray doesn't throw a lot of fastballs to begin with, right? And when he did, he got hurt on one of the fastballs. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to see how the back and forth goes on that, especially given the different ballparks effects.
In general, target field has played pretty neutral. It's better for right-handed power hitters than left-handed power hitters, but it's been a neutral-ish and sometimes even shading to pitcher-friendly over the years. Yep. I think now it's maybe slightly hitter-friendly. It's become.
I think so too.
But like what Baltimore did, and we saw it at Comerica did the opposite, which is Comerica was like impossible.
Comerica National Park.
Yeah, I mean to center and left center it was like impossible. So they just moved the bullpen in like 25 feet, and it's kind of neutralized it a little bit. But the Orioles did the opposite, which is Camden. When it's called, what's it called now? The ballpark at Camden Yards or whatever. Okay. Camden Yards. Yeah. When it first opened in the mid-90s, it was like the first of the new ballparks. Yeah. And it was a launching pad. Right. But part of that perception of that, people don't actually look at splits. They're just looking at how many home runs are getting hit, which is not how you calculate a park factor. Right. They had like all those teams with Rafael Palmeiro, and I mean, they hit 1 billion homers, and they were playing in the East with the Red Sox and the Yankees, who also hit 1 billion homers.
Also the steroid era.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, 50 homers were commonplace. Right. Sure. And so then in the last like 10 years, it became somewhat of a neutral-ish ballpark, and maybe slight hitter's ballpark. But people kept talking about it. Like if you watch a broadcast against the Orioles, the visiting team will obviously say like, "Hey, welcome to Camden Yards. Right. This is a launching pad," and you would look and you'd be like, "Well, not really." But now they've taken it so far in the other direction that there's on Baseball Savant on any kind of distance fly ball, it'll immediately register
how many parks
that would have been a homer if hit the same trajectory basically. Right. How many parks out of the 30 would that have been a homer? And it's very common. I would say most home runs are not an all 30 home run. I mean, very rarely. A lot of them you'll see like 25. It would have been a home run 25 out of 30. Right. I mean, Fenway screws up a lot of that.
Sure, because it doesn't get high enough to go over the wall.
On the other side, like Yankee Stadium creates some 1 out of 30 situations and all that. But it's fascinating. There are so many where it's like 29 out of 30. And the one is now Camden because they just pushed the left field fence back 50 feet or whatever. It's incredible. Like it really, I don't mind that. That's part of what I like about baseball is the fact that it's not just a standardized field.
Yep.
I mean, obviously that doesn't work in any other sport.
Right.
You can't imagine a hockey rink where it's just twice as long or whatever, or a football field's at 75 yards or whatever. But
hockey rinks do come in like Olympic sized versus professional.
Well, sure, but
it's a little different.
There's slow ice and there's fast ice. But I'm trying to imagine like an NBA court where it's like, hey, actually our 3-point line's 18 feet, or our 3-point line's 30 feet, and that would be fascinating.
Right, yes,
the way it is in baseball, but it does make sort of apples and oranges stat comparisons tricky. Or to your point, see how many fly balls the Orioles are willingly giving up to left center,
right,
and see what happens to those fly balls compared to Baltimore. Although, as you said earlier, the Twins ain't hitting left-handed pitching anyway. So
well, that's true too. Yeah, I don't. Are we facing a bunch of lefties though? I don't know either.
Okay, thank you to Stamps.com, the Game Time app, BetterHelp.com, SodaStickCo.com, and Raycon by Raycon.
Yes.
We will be back Monday for the Patreon subscribers, of which you should be one. Why not?
Yep.
Patreon.com/Gleeman. We'll have a recap of any news and notes from the Baltimore series this weekend. And
Wednesday mailbag
of the draft.
Sign up on Monday or Tuesday for the Patreon so you can participate in the mailbag call on Tuesday for sure. And then we'll be back on Friday to preview the second half of the 2023 World Champion Minnesota Twins season.
Sounds drunk already.
Gleeman